and welcome, Mr. Michael Steer. Thank you
Hello.
very much for agreeing to join me on the podcast, sir.
No problem at all. No, delighted to be here.
So I came across your video. It was this week. Was it this week? Last week? One of in the most recent days, and we'd just been speaking off camera and before press record and went live. I don't really watch a lot of actual TV, terrestrial TV, shall we say?
Yeah.
For the young'uns listening, they won't know what that is.
The 4 channels.
Yeah. Well, it was magical when it turned to 5, wasn't it? As soon as Channel 5 came along.
Best night of my life at that
point. And so I came across this clip. And for those that don't know you, obviously, you were part of the teaching staff of Educating Yorkshire, which was a Channel 4 programme. And there was a clip where there was 4 girls that had that you'd sort of kind of taken your personal challenge to help them pass their maths GCSE.
Yes.
And the way that you were teaching them, something, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed maths. I passed maths quite easily. But something that is generally classed as boring is maths, and then on top of that, algebra is one of the more boring subjects of maths.
It's the boring cherry on a boring cake.
Yeah, but the way that you were teaching it and the way that you sort of were engaging the kids in it that obviously weren't overly interested, it struck me as something that shouldn't be, but very much is, in my experience, rare within the teaching industry and within the teaching world. And I reached out to you literally that evening when I saw it, and I thought, you know what, I've been waiting for the right person in terms of who's in education that I want to speak to, and you're that man. So for those that don't know you and don't know what you do and what you do on a daily basis, please go ahead and tell them.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I'm a teacher. I've been teaching now for 24 years, which sounds terrifying. In fact, my first day in the classroom was September the 12th, 2001. So the day after 9/11 was the first. I went in as a trainee. Well, my first day as a trainee teacher, which was a very odd atmosphere, but it's easy to remember the day, obviously. And now, it's my 25th year I've been in the schools. And I had a short stint in banks before that. And I think when it was on Channel 4, they sort of said ex-banker, which made me sound like I was in, like I was Jordan Belfort or something. And that's not the case at all. It was very much that I was working in a high street branch of a bank, and it was, it was not a pleasant experience. It was very sales based, and it was just not something I enjoyed doing. So I left because I didn't like that job, and I thought, well, do I go into police? Do I go into teaching? Because I thought 2 options at the time of a steady career. And I actually chose police.
Right.
And then I rang them up and said, oh, well, I'd want to join. So, well, this is how you enter the force. I said, well, what level can I join at? And they were like, well, the bottom, because you've never been a policeman before. And I said, I've got a degree. And they said, that means nothing to us. And I thought, well, I'm not cut out for that. See, I've been told what they had to do. So I thought, well, I'll go into teaching. I've been told a lot at school by my own teachers and my adults that were around me, you should be a teacher. And I think partly I ran away from it. I just thought, no, I'm going to do something else. I'm not going to be a teacher. And then
that
I was
push back 24. Push back to authority, like it always is, isn't it? Yeah, as a kid,
that's the least rebellious kid in the world. But at that point, I was like, this is the one little thing I can do. So I thought, and I just thought, well, I'll train and I'll see what it's like. I went and did the training, and within about 3 months, I was just like, this is absolutely what I want to do. At the time, you had to have a second subject. So I was a mathematician, but it said you need a second subject. So do you want to do science? And I said, actually, now I want to do drama as my second subject. I want to be a maths and drama teacher. And they were like, you don't think you can even do that? I said, well, I want, I'd always enjoyed drama. I did an A-level in theatre studies. I used to go watch the Edinburgh Festival, and I was like, that's what I would like as my second subject. So when I started teaching, I always sort of saw it as a bit of a performance. I thought, this is how I viewed it, is that they're in a room facing me. it's my duty to be engaging. It's my
Your
duty
center
to,
stage.
yeah, to hook them in. Because if you're just going to go there and read monotonously from a book, there's literally no point you being there. You can put a video on for that. Yeah, so I went to my first training day. I remember being at Leeds University, and one of the professors sort of singling me out because I had a car. He said, "I'm sorry to do." He genuinely said, "I'm sorry to do this to you, but you have a car, so you're going to have to go to Thornhill, and we'll give you." He said, "We'll give you somewhere nice next time," is what he said to me.
Oh,
So I
nice.
thought, well, this sounds promising. I So I remember the day before I went in, or the weekend before it was actually, I drove to the school. I made sure, because with sat navs, but they were TomTom stick-on ones. I
Yeah, yeah.
drove up to find it, and yeah, it is in the middle of two housing estates. And I thought, I know where I'm going. And I went in on the first day, and within 10, 15 minutes of being there, they'd offered me a job. It was
Wow.
like, did you find it okay? Was the journey all right? Would you like to work here in September? And it was because at the time, the guy who sort of said this, he's a CEO now of a whole multi-academy trust, but still a good mate. He had no maths department to speak of, and he was just desperate to get maths teachers in. And his philosophy was, this guy knows maths. I've talked to him for a few minutes. He seems reasonably engaging and normal. I want to get him in. But then just being in a school where it was quite dire circumstances, where in fact there was literally no maths department. It was like two of us, and one of us was a trainee, sort of trying to educate all these kids. That's what sort of just honed a love for it straight away, is
Mm.
because the kids were grateful. I mean, so just to have another adult on that corridor who could actually help teach them maths. And now it'd be unheard of. As a trainee teacher with no experience, I was by myself teaching a GCSE group. But it was like that baptism of fire that really sort of made me think, actually, yeah, this is where I want to be. And I always say my work ethic was first in, last out, mainly not because I was so important and incredibly busy. It's just that I just wanted to learn more. And within 4 years, I'd actually got to an assistant headship role at Thornhill.
Wow.
It was sort of, yeah, it just all fell to place. So I'd been there quite a long time when the TV show sort of turned up. We had a new head teacher, Johnny Mitchell, and he was like,
Yeah, yeah.
"I'm interested in doing this show." And he I brought it to the senior leadership team and said, who else would be interested? And it was a literal 5-2 vote in favour. So we said, well, we're interested. And in a long process. And at the end of the process, they chose us to be the school. And yeah, and it was an interesting, they just came, but it's just a really fascinating time with stuff that was going on. They were doing incredible production team, but they really sort of dropped on what was going on at the school. And for me, I'd just taken on this class of just, and we did the year 10 exams, and I hadn't taught any of them before. And there was 56 that failed their end of year 10 mock exams. And I made the decision that I was going to take on all of them. And so I said, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take all these kids on. I'm going to teach them all. And this was the days when you could do like 3 bites of the cherry at the GCSE. So you could sit it in
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
November. You could sit January. So we did a November. So they came in the TV show. They were like, oh, this is an interesting story. This guy's got a massive sort of number of kids he's teaching. And we had a real intense push. We did the November exams, and like 33 of them passed. So all of a sudden, the classes were reduced to like 9 or 10 kids in each class. So when they came in, if you watch the footage of me filming, there's about 7 or 8 kids in the room. And like, why is it such a small class? It's because they'd all managed to pass early, and we sort of farmed them off. But they really, yeah. So that was it. And I sort of had these girls. I just thought, it's understanding, I think, and that feeling that education is, life changing. Some people,
Yeah.
and it's social mobility and all that just comes from it. And just thinking, it's my sort of duty now, if I'm in front of this class, to do everything I can to get them across the line at the end of the year. So, yeah, I've been I think I've rambled around that point quite a lot there, but my philosophy was honed early on. It's like whatever role I'm in, whatever level I rise to, classroom teacher has to be the most important part of it, because that's where the most difference is made.
Well, I think,
And
yeah, I must admit, like, when you were talking about it, I think it goes for most professions, and most people that rise to the profession almost being their passion is they kind of meander into it. They don't particularly go straight for it, like, this is what I want to be when I grow up, and Some do, and some are lucky in that respect. But it's similar, you know. I've meandered for years and years and years and years and years until I've landed, and I've worked in an industry for 17 years, and then decided it's not actually for me. I've kind of been fighting against myself for 17 years. So, like the fact that you went from, well, not Wall Street banker, but
Yeah.
high street banker
Yeah.
to I won't make that Channel 4 mistake.
Yeah.
And then into obviously, police. Oh, police is not for me. And then meandering into teaching. And then obviously the things that sort of get dropped into your place where you kind of get put in the bad school, so to speak, as per the training staff. And then
Yeah.
it kind of just snowballs from there. It's quite interesting that I know, and we spoke before, certain teachers, in not so much in my primary school, but definitely in my secondary school, I still lean on the lessons that it taught me. The two in particular. So one I told you about was the deputy head, Pat McKeon, and he was called. He's about 6'6", I think,
Yeah.
massive guy, bald head. Looked at you. If you looked at you with a stern look, you needed a new chair,
Yeah.
new pair of underpants.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But so fair, and everybody loved him. I couldn't think of anybody that didn't like him. His affectionate name was Big Mac. And then there was another gentleman that's no longer with us, who actually was a school friend of my dad's, called Mick Ennis. And Mick was my head of year. And I went to an all boys school, which was quite, it's a different prospect to those that
Yeah.
haven't ever been in one, or, it is unruly. It is, for instance, I remember Mick once picking me up by my sideburns, come from behind me. I was doodling in my book, and he'd pick me up by my sideburns, slap my cheeks, and then said, "Carry on."
Yeah.
And I got back down and carried on with my work. And that was sort of the sort of manner in which we were taught. But it was very, it was a good environment to be in, to be honest.
Yeah.
But then, like you said, we did have teachers that were obviously clever, obviously had been trained well, and were very intelligent. But like you said, in terms of that performance, they are center stage. They're front and center, and especially kids. And it's more difficult, I should suspect, for you in this era with TikTok and YouTube and all that sort of stuff to grip their attention to the point where, like you said, reading monotonously from a textbook, and well, back in our day on the blackboard and with the chalk, and
Yeah.
copy what I do. It's for me, that wasn't teaching. I didn't get anything out of them lessons. And I very much, I think, I was speaking to my missus earlier today, and I was just saying, I was excited about sort of you coming on and speaking to you about education. And I coasted through school to the point where there were generally 3 lessons that I loved and really loved and looked forward to. One was chemistry,
Right.
2 was art, and 3
Yeah.
was sport.
Yeah.
And that was 3 hours out of a 25-hour week. And it was like, for me, I don't necessarily think it was a subject matter, not all of it, but it was very much the fact that they are my interests. I enjoy that. And I look at the education system now, and I think it must be difficult for you in an educator's capacity to think like, I know what would work, but yet from higher up down, whether it be national curriculum, that's not, it's almost like you're fighting with your hands tied behind your back, I should suspect, but you tell me.
Yeah. No, it is. It's very sort of frustrating to be part of a system that is so obviously to most people flawed, because we teach. I mean, as a maths teacher, and I say it's the most common question, and I address this sort of straight out the gate in most classes I teach. It says, you are going to want to ask me at least 3 times an hour, what is the point of this? So especially if you're doing algebraic manipulation or something, and you're learning how to solve a pair of simultaneous equations with a pencil and a piece of paper. And they've all got in their blazer pocket a phone. And if they just picked it out and said, 2x plus 3y equals 17 and 4x minus 2y is 12, what are x and y? And it will tell them instantly. So it's learning a skill for the sake of learning that skill so you can replicate it 2 years later. And if you're better at remembering the skill, you get better exam results. And it's like, it's mad because some of the cleverest people I know don't have amazing exam results. I mean, my dad, rest his soul, he was a really clever bloke and he had 2 CSEs, like Rodney
Yeah.
Cross, who he had maths and art or whatever it was. But he was a really bright and clever bloke, but he just was never that push to have, you must have 8 GCSEs. You must be able to infer meaning in A Christmas Carol if you're ever going to get on in life, which is absolute nonsense. If you love reading, I mean, we both said we absolutely love books. I love The Christmas Carol, the Muppets version especially. But why does that particular skill, who decides which of these particular skills are the ones that are going to set you up for life? And I'm entirely on board with the idea of showing that you're capable of learning, showing that you're able to problem solve, that you're able to sort of make progress in certain areas. But it's the straitjacketing of, it must be maths and English. And I was having a conversation tonight with two of my colleagues while I'm on duty on the gate, and we're talking about students who generally struggle in a normal mainstream education, but there is no set provision for them. And it's like, why, what do we do? Why do we do this? And we are judged as a school on the number of kids who get a certain number of GCSEs at a certain level. So we have a student who is going to really struggle to get the 8 GCSEs. We have to make the call of, do we take the hit on our progress figures and our attainment figures to make a more meaningful education for that student? Or do we try and push them into you must do these 8 GCSEs? In which case that's not good for them because they'll probably crash out and burn in all of them. And more now, you get some schools that will take the latter option, just more maths, more English, more science, as if sitting in front of a maths teacher for 9 hours a fortnight and not really understanding it is going to be rectified by making it 12 hours a fortnight.
It becomes like a resentful relationship with learning then, I think. So, it very much. So my personal experience, I went through all the primary school, all the secondary school, not knowing that I was dyslexic. And then as soon as I went to college, I got screened. And then it turned out I was dyslexic and everything sort of made sense. And it was like, I'm not thick. I just struggle.
Yeah. Different wiring.
So with English, I was clever enough to be in, I don't know whether you still have sets anymore. I was clever enough to be in the top set, but I was the only person in the top set doing a lower tier GCSE paper.
Right. Yeah.
Now, that was so demoralizing for me.
Yes.
Because it's like, well, am I clever enough or am I not clever enough? Because if I'm and it was an area of sort of, it made me think, right, well, I don't want to read anymore. And I must admit, like we were just talking, two of my biggest joys in life now are movies and books. I love reading books and I love watching movies. And I probably went through 15 years of my life not wanting to read books based on probably subconsciously thinking, well, English isn't for me, obviously. English is not my sort of subject or my sort of bag because I'm not good at it. And don't get me wrong, I've worked so hard and so long since coming back to sort of literature that I've improved the way that I speak. I've improved my vocabulary. I've improved my understanding of the English language. But at my pace, in the way that I want to do it, and reading the books that I want to read, rather than being forced to read William Shakespeare that I don't understand a word of. And that sort of resentful relationship with education is a very dangerous thing to cultivate when if you've got a student that could do, maybe get 4 A's in 4 subjects that he loves, but using the remaining 4 or 5 or 6, then for me, and probably for yourself, it sounds like the better thing is to say, well, follow your passion, get the 4 A's, ignore the rest because that's not going to be in your life, so to speak, because it's not what you want to do. But then that's where the school gets judged
Yeah.
on exams.
And for me, that is the thing, is it's judging.
Mm.
Schools are judged. I mean, and absolutely, schools should be accountable. So people should be able
Yes.
to come into schools and say, are you doing the right things for the people, these students that you have? Are the young people in your care getting the right things? But then when it just has so much, but you also must, but get them all 8 GCSEs, why don't you, as well? And, make sure, man, they've all got to do science, and they've all got to do maths, and they've all got to do English and English literature. Because if you don't do English literature, we'll halve your English language value point. And it's all
Yeah.
these weird little things that come in. It's rather than, I mean, to have a school to say this is going to be completely bespoke for every, you need 2,000 staff to every
Of
1,000
course.
kids. It's not possible, but there is a better way. If you had that freedom to sort of somebody to come in and say, right, what are you doing? Have that conversation. What's your philosophy? What's your vision? What are you trying to do for these kids? And then say, right, and how are you going to get there? And to agree, make tweaks, support the schools in doing that thing, rather than just sort of saying, where's the 8 GCSEs? And we have, Ofsted and lots of things have come away from being, it's all on results, which is a good thing. Guarding
100%.
inclusion are massive now. And that, again, is number one, obviously. Safeguarding and inclusion has to be number one.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just, I remember sort of several years ago, just the show was on, I was invited up to an organisation called Children in Scotland. So it invited me up to come and do a speech at their national convention. And it was, it was the Hilton in Glasgow. And I said, oh, yeah, that sounds like an interesting life thing to do. And
Go
I
on
thought,
then.
yeah, go on. And it was just like, write a speech, talk about what you want. So I sort of did quite a sort of scathing sort of thing about league tables and judgment in schools and how it should be a more supportive environment. And I got there with this, got there with this speech ready to go. And I was talking to one of the organisers, and there was the Scottish Education Minister was there, and like people were hugging him and shaking his hands. I was like, so why are people so happy to see the Education Minister? And they were like, oh, we love him. He's great. He's so supportive. He listens to us. I was like, really? Because I've written this speech sort of really slagging off education ministers. It's probably not appropriate. So I had to rewrite the speech on the morning of the thing. I was just scribbling speeches down on napkins to sort of just like me up what I did on my holidays or whatever I ended up talking about. But it was so odd sort of to see that different thing. 'Cause they had a thing called the big curriculum, I think they called it, the curriculum for excellence in Scotland, where they looked at it and just sort of tore it all down and sort of all collaborated to try and build it up in something more meaningful. And it was always dead interesting, that idea to me, that they would look at education on anything other than a political timescale. Because education, and I've said this a few times as well, in England, it's all these, the only thing that really gets reported on is those GCSE results. They've gone up
Yeah.
again, they've gone down again. And I'll talk more about the horribleness about how that works. A system predicated on the idea that 30% of the kids must not hit the standard, which is awful. So
Wow.
when you talk about, well, what was grade C's to us is now level grade 4s.
Oh yeah, it's changed, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
grade 4 is only 70% of students are allowed to get to that. So basically, say it's all maths, and all the 711,000 students who do maths, they're just ranked in a great big list. And somewhere around the 500,000 mark, the line goes through. And if you're above that line, you're going to get a 4 and above. If you're below that line, you get a 321U. But it's not, but that's why the grade boundaries change year after year. So it always is like something kind of, the grade boundaries have gone up again. So one year you might get 55%. And that 55%, that's your grade 5. The next year you get 55% and you get a grade 4 because people have done better overall.
Right.
So it changes. And it's not, we're going to set a pass mark. And if you get that pass mark, well done. No, we are going to set a number of students who are allowed to pass. And if you're
Wow.
in the top 70%, then well done. So it's a horrible system.
Well, it doesn't make sense. Like I always remember, like 50% was your C grade. Like if you got 50% or above, you were generally okay. That's
Around that area, yeah.
That's where you were all right. Whereas anything under 50%, and you were at danger of D's, E's, F's, and
Yes.
U's, and it. Yeah, I mean, So what that says is basically, if you have a particularly clever year, where they're all getting high scores, then you your person that could get like a 3, 2, or a 1 could in essence be maybe a 5 or a 6 the year after if it's a
Yeah,
particularly unintelligent
yeah.
year.
If it's a lower ability, yeah. And it's a national thing. It's this weird idea that every year 700,000 16-year-olds in the country will be ever so slightly cleverer than last year's 700,000 16-year-olds. And it goes on. Whereas if you've got that many students doing what is essentially the same set of exams, there's going to be 10, 12% background noise of just deviation. So one
Yeah,
year, if it was just set percentages, 60% is a pass. One year you might get 65% get it. The next year you might get 77%. The next year it might be 59%. And the graph of what school attainment would be like that. And everyone would say, what the hell is going on with education? Why is it all over the place? We like it to go like this
yeah,
because we're
yeah.
comfortable with a nice little straight line. So we give them a nice little straight line. And that's like, is awful. Because I
It's
mean,
it's so. Do you think? And this sort of is one of my bugbears of wider government as well in terms of different aspects. Is it sounds to me like whoever's come up with this system, and
mhm,
we've seen it through. We saw it through the pandemic. We saw it
yeah.
through. Other areas as well that's happened recently. I mean, digital ID being one thing, is the fact that nobody seems to consult consult the people that fucking know. They know, they are in the trenches. They do it for a living.
Yeah.
Why don't you speak to that person? Why don't you get their opinion? Because they do this day to day. Like somebody like yourself that's done it for over 20 years. Like, yeah, it would be beneficial to speak to this person to
So,
find out what would work.
well, bizarre you should say this because back in 2014, um, there was an all-party parliamentary committee, which I'm always glad when I say that correct, about this reform. And they were and they invited some senior leaders up to Westminster. And because of the TV show, I was somebody who got that invite. So I went up to Westminster, not to the palace, as I went to the bit where they actually do all the work around the corner. And I got there, and there was 7 deputy head teachers and head teachers in the room, most of them much more experienced than I was. I think I was about 13 years in at this point, a lot about 30 years of experience. And we were all sat there. And then there was Barry Sheenan, who was the Huddersfield MP. So that was on Labour. There's a Lib Dem guy whose name I forget, which probably tells you all you need to know. Then in the middle of it all, there was Liz Truss.
Wow.
So yeah, future Prime Minister Liz Truss. So that was like such a weird thing. And I thought, oh, they brought us here to consult. That's a really good thing. But it was so much lip service
Mm,
because whatever was said by any of those educators around that table, because the original idea was we're going to go away from it was just after the pizza league tables come out, the international education tables. And I think we were like 19th in English and 14th in maths in the world.
yeah.
And Michael Gove had said, this is absolutely awful. We should be much higher than this. How can we be so low in English? Completely disregarding that how these tables were calculated. And some countries only sent in select data. Some countries didn't select data. And so
Yeah,
we just
statistics.
sent everything in.
Yeah, statistics can always be
Yeah,
manipulated to make anything look bad or good. They
yeah.
always do. Always do.
And so this thing that we need to reform education. And one of the things was he'd been to a public school and he was like, well, I learned the poems of Dryden by rote. That's what we need to do to everybody in the country now. Let's make everything more difficult and let's get rid of this A star to G nonsense. And we'll change that and we'll make it numbers. And the first thing they said was, well, we're going to make it so 1 will be an A star, 2 will be an A, 3 will be a B. And somebody said, well, then what is the point? If 1 is an A
I
star,
was literally thinking the exact same thing.
And there's like little sort of muttering of people, and they came back and said, okay, okay, we'll make it slightly different. So instead of a 10-point scale, it will be a 9-point scale. And I said, well, what will a 1 be in that case? Well, it will be an A star, but better. It will be an A star star. And so, well, how will that work? And they were like, it was almost like they were making it up on the spot. And then one of the other teachers on the table went, we used to use one as the best for CSEs back in the day. And they're like, so one used to be the best. Yeah, well, 9 will be the best. So it just got flipped upside down. And when it eventually, and we were like, this is a bad idea. There's don't see a point to this. But all the politicians were like, no, we need to change. And it was almost a fait accompli. They'd been
Mm.
told, this trust in particular, this is going to change. And in the midst of all this, they had one of my, at that point, childhood heroes who inexplicably had been brought into the conversation and was in the room, which was Johnny Ball. As
Wow.
in, as in Johnny Ball explains all Zoe's dad, the
Yeah.
TV, the cuddly uncle of maths. And he was there. And what a lovely, lovely man, but also had nothing to do with education and just kept extolling teaching like they do in Chinese schools. And you're like, well, that's all well and good, but it's a completely different culture
Yeah,
in
and
Chinese schools.
well, one, it's not China, and two, it's
that's the number one. Yeah,
yeah, that it's a big difference. And then at the same time, you've got to take into account social values. Education, social values, as it is worldly known that Chinese or Oriental sort of cultures place a massive value on education,
yeah,
massive value above anything else. Whereas in our country, in England, it's not really placed at a high level at all.
Some people do, obviously. Others, I mean, most people, it's they want their kids to do well. They are, they're slightly indifferent really to schools, as in, they want their kids to go there. They want them to be happy, to not be hassled, to get good results and move on. Others are very, very focused and are sort of very interactive with the school. Others are almost diametrically opposed to the school.
Yeah.
And it seems mad. And I never sort of, when I started teaching, I always thought that other adults would be respectful of teachers.
Yeah.
And I just thought that you're never going to, I was terrified of the concept when I was a kid of one of my teachers ringing my mum or dad to say I wasn't doing that. Because I thought, well, my mum or dad, and the 1 or 2 times it happened, yeah, I absolutely was, not in the good books, do we say. But now you can ring a parent and just say, well, so-and-so's done this today, and unfortunately he's told a member of staff to F off. And you quite often get the response, well, what did the teacher do? What did the teacher do to make him say that? And you say, well, he asked him to do some work. It's like, yeah, but how did he ask him to work? Was he, yeah, and it's like,
yeah, it
feels like you're missing the point.
I think that I do commend any whether I think they're a good educator, a bad educator, or the too long in the tooth or too old. I commend every single teacher that does the profession, because I know for a fact I'd probably be in prison if I was a teacher, because I would lose my temper to the point where I couldn't do it. And I think I've had, like you said, I've had a couple of run-ins with teachers for my daughter, and but for me, it's never been about the educational aspect. I remember, I won't mention any names because I don't think it's fair, but I remember one teacher telling me when my daughter was 5 or 6, we just have a clash of personalities. And I remember sat, in fact, I was stood at the door, and it was very much, she must have been able to see the cogs turning in my head, because it was like, did she just say that they have a clash of personalities with a 5-year-old? It's that sort of element of if you care, which quite evidently, this is why I wanted to speak to you do deeply. And I can tell the teachers that I've come into contact with, the teachers that have taught me, the teachers that I know that I've got family members that are teachers. My sister, she's not there at the minute, but she was a teacher, and my dad was a college lecturer. And I still get people now who were taught by my dad that come up to me and go, your dad was my best teacher I've ever had. He was fantastic. It was this. And it's that sort of element of care when people show that they care, regardless of whether they teach them or not, or they're an effective teacher. If they actually give a damn,
Yeah.
it makes all the difference,
It
I
does.
think. One, because the kid becomes more engaged and will then want to work for that person
Yeah.
because that mutual respect is given. Um, but yeah, I think that I mean I'm still sort of reeling over the fact that what I thought about the government was actually right
Yeah.
for a change in terms of it.
Absolutely.
It's just y- you know, I do you think that we're stunting with these sort of systems and processes in place? Do you think that we're stunting certain children's uh, academical sort of genius in a sense to the point where ki- I, most of them probably will find a way eventually,
Yeah. But
but to nurture it, do you know what I mean?
yeah, I think so often you hear, I mean, you said it yourself, like you'll hear about people who get past school and then realize what their passion is, or then realize, like
Yeah.
you said about realizing you were dyslexic after school and then getting into reading and things. And it's weird that you had to come away from an establishment set up for your education to actually sort of start getting educated in some ways, which is what it is saying. And again, it is that straitjacketing. And of course, there's many, many wonderful schools that do incredible things and do everything they can to individualize this. But when you've got a one size fits all approach, which education in this country really is at the moment, as a
Mm.
general umbrella thing,
Yeah, yeah.
then of course people are going to get missed. You know, you're sort of aiming in the middle of the bell curve and the outliers don't really get the consideration. And you look
Mm.
at, permanent exclusion figures in this country as well, or you look at sort of even fixed term exclusions or isolation units and just all these things that have been sort of hot potato topics in the past about putting kids into booths. And I've worked in schools where they have booths.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, and I currently work in a school where basically there's no kind of sort of booze at all. There's no booze, there's no sort of seclusion. Kids are, if necessarily moved at that moment, but their very best is done to try and get back into the classroom the next lesson because it's the best place for them to be. And it's really, really difficult. But the either side, if you like, the tails of that bell curve, it's almost impossible to properly cater for. And in the middle, most of the kids are probably a little bit bored,
Yeah.
but they're quiet. And
But they
it's
get through.
not honestly to
Yeah.
say,
I think so is that it's a really good analogy you mentioned about the bell curve and sort of the outliers getting sort of missed. Are they get in that sense from my point of view, a teacher like you would make sure that they don't get missed. Whereas, and this is only from my personal experience, so it's not a go at anybody, but I think there's quite a lot of teachers that would. It's almost well, it's not in my remit. I'm teaching the curriculum. It's not my job to make sure that they're okay. It's my job to teach this, the middle of the bell curve. And when you've got the system and certain teachers that treat it as a job rather than a passion and a vocation and a paycheck, that's when these kids get missed. When it almost the system and the person that's implementing the system is sort of not for them, if
yeah,
that makes sense.
well, yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
Um,
I would say so. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to say that still, I would say the vast majority of teachers that I've worked with are in the profession for exactly the right reason.
mm,
But when you talk about the sort of those extremes of students, sometimes it's not a lack of desire, sometimes, but a lack of ability or support to deal with them. Because again, within schools, we have certain levels of funding. We have lots of kids who need almost one-to-one support, and you just don't physically have the people, the bodies there to
right.
do it. So if you've got 25, 28 kids in a class and then you're by yourself with 28 kids and two of them need incredibly focused attention and then another, yeah, it's very difficult to do that within an hour, to give them that focused attention, then to get them working and get everybody else going. And it's a real difficult thing. And so some will try, the most will try sort of valiantly to do it, but it's almost that next level of, I've tried this, 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 and this. Now, what else can we do? Where else can they go if
Yeah.
that's not working? And I think that is an area where we are significantly lacking as a country is dedicated specialist provisions that are not just PRUs, pupil referral units. Like, there's lots and lots of sort of provisions for the naughty kids in inverted commas,
Yeah, yeah.
but where's the national sort of intervention before they get to that point?
Yeah,
Yeah,
one of my friends, shout out to Syra. She and her and four others, I think. Forgive me, Syra, if I got that
yeah,
wrong. She started an app called Send Together,
right,
which is all about obviously special educational
yeah,
needs, and it's a really good app. So if anybody anybody wants to sort of check it out, it's Send the number 2 and Together. It's absolutely fantastic. But I know that would have helped me at school.
yes,
Is that the Sen, well, they're called Senkos now, aren't they? I think,
yes,
which
yes,
is
and go, yeah,
special educational needs coordinator.
yes, hold on, yeah, yeah,
I got that. And I think that provision has got better, better and better and better over the years that obviously my daughter's been going to school and whatnot. But I think you're right, where they are limited with sort of the funding and they're limited with the resources. And, when you've got maybe one Senko in a school full of 300 children, you've only got 25 hours a week to sort of
yeah,
give to 25 students, but then
yeah,
you've got to have your lunch in that. You've got to do all your work and all your write-ups
yeah,
in that. And it unfortunately, it's that sort of, it's the system, not the teachers, that are
mm.
failing. Oh, it's the system that's failing the teachers and the students at the same time. Um,
Oh
and
yeah,
go on, sorry.
I'm going to say you can just feel like that. It's just in what else can I do as one person? Yeah, I mean, this is about 120 odd members of staff at our school and 1,000 students, and it seems like, oh, that's a lot, but only 60 of those 125 are teaching staff.
Right.
So yeah, so, as I say, in most classrooms you've got up to 32 students at the same time. With our support staff, if we've got we don't go to stop these 120 students who need support in lessons, and we've got 15 support staff, it's just
What can you do?
simple maths, isn't
Yeah.
it? You can't. So then as a teacher, you've got to try and like, well, what's the best I can do? But then if they're struggling, you have to go and help them. Then all this over here is going on, and it's and sometimes it works. You plan all you can, and you work, and it feels brilliant when it works. But sometimes you'll just be like, well, this has gone terribly, and and just it's reflecting and adapting. And I think that's one of the key things about teaching is that the best teachers will have a bad lesson or will have a lesson that's not gone to plan, and they'll think about themselves and say,
Yes.
what went wrong there? What could I have done better? And it's not beating yourself up. It's just like,
No.
how can I make that better?
Yeah, it's adapting. Yeah.
Whereas almost the worst thing you can do is look for a way to blame the kids. It's like, well, that kid was misbehaving and that's where the lesson went wrong. But actually, a lot of the time, that kid's misbehaving because they don't understand what they're meant to be doing.
And at
And
the same time, that I've always struggled with the fact that when when teachers have said, the kids have misbehaved. Well, yeah, the kids. That's what kids
oh,
do.
yes,
That's
yeah,
like if I think we've mentioned, like, well, if you don't want kids to misbehave, don't go into teaching, because that's what's going to happen. And especially at your level in terms of high school rather than primary school, but high school is, you're going to get that. That is part and parcel. I know, even though I was probably an half decent student, at times I could be a little shit, to the point where I was probably awful,
yeah,
and horrible to teach.
yeah,
But my teachers, some of them, never gave up on me.
yeah.
I think
And that's it.
I apologize
Yeah.
to my German teacher right now, because
Yeah, yeah,
to be fair, like, since subsequently, this is the other thing, I've never understood French and German in
yeah.
schools.
No.
It's, for me, it should be Spanish. Spanish is
Sería el español. Muy bien. Sí.
well, honestly, like, Spanish should be a thing. One, because it's more of a universal language
Mm,
than it is just a localized language.
yeah.
I know people in Africa speak French, but really, you've got France
Yeah.
and North Africa.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
about it.
So
Whereas
Equatorial Guinea speaks Spanish. I think it's one of my favourite quiz questions. That, but yeah, but like,
But yeah, and so yeah, I apologize to
yeah,
Mr. Kitson, he was
yeah,
called. I apologize, Mr. Kitson. I wasn't the best. But I think this kind of leads me on to a really interesting point that I've seen recently, because I know I mentioned digital ID before,
yes,
and this is, I'm not going down that route, but in terms of, I've seen that happen in the mainstream media and everybody's sort of gone away with it. It's the future and it makes it easier and blah, blah, blah. And then what a lot of people haven't realized, on the other hand, is they're trying to ban phones from classrooms and schools at the same time. So on one hand, they're saying this is really good technology for the digital ID stuff. And then on the other hand, they're saying this is really detrimental to children's learning and health.
yeah,
Now, I did a post on this. I think I posted it. I don't understand. If I was a teacher and somebody came to me and said, look, we've got this device that could keep children's attention for hours on end, would you want to use it in your classroom? 100%. Yeah. Yeah, I'll use that. And I know from firsthand, my daughter uses, it's called, if I get it right, TTRS, which is Times Table Rock Stars.
yeah. Totally well size. Yeah,
Yeah, she absolutely loves it.
mm,
And she'll do that at home here.
yeah,
And it's like, that's such a simple innovation in terms of bringing that into the classroom and making it like a competition and a
yeah,
league table, and they can
yeah.
earn points to buy things for their character and this, that, the other. I've never understood why that can't or won't be implemented within sort of a secondary school setting. Do you find that as a problem?
It's yeah. I mean, the thing that, like we said, I think I mentioned it earlier. I did mention it about the technology that the kids have in their pockets, which is, every kid's phone has more capacity in one kid's phone than there was in all of the IT facilities in the entire school. Because I mean,
Yes.
I'm still, I mean, I'm a bit older than you, but we had like one BBC computer in the school when I was at primary school, and classes could go together to watch little blocks move around the screen. And you'd all stand around looking at it, and then it was just basic word processing when I was at high
Yeah,
school.
yeah.
And
256 meg floppy disk.
yeah,
That's what it was.
yeah, and it was like, it wasn't, but that's incredible amount of technology. But the amount of sort of curriculum and national curriculum reform that would need to do to completely fold in sort of this sort of hybrid version, if you like, of using this device and accessing a curriculum on it in a way that people would do at work. I mean, if I was going to write a new teaching and learning policy tomorrow, I would probably use AI as a starting point.
100%.
I would use AI as a starting point, and then I would tweak it down. If I was going to submit something to my boss, and he's like, I want you to write something for me, I would write it, I would talk to him about it, I would send him a draft of it, he would we'd sit down, we'd talk about it, I'd go away, I'd refine it, and eventually we'd end up with the correct thing. And then kids, these 11, 16-year-olds in high school, have to work in this way that's completely different to how they'll end up working in the real world when they leave school.
They can't draw parallels.
No.
That, like, this is, I had this conversation in terms of who was I speaking to? I can't remember. But in terms of AI, like, oh, that was it. It was my missus, because she works in the charity sector, and she was talking about they're getting applications for jobs and they're using AI.
Yeah.
And I've said, look, the way I use ChatGPT quite a lot,
Mm.
and I use it on a daily basis. And it's really good for somebody like me, is the fact that I've got 60,000 neurons firing at once with different thoughts left, right, and center, and I can just get them out on a page. And what ChatGPT will do is go, right, I'll make sense of them for you. And I'll put them in some sort of chronological order where other
Mm.
people can understand what you actually think,
Yeah.
if that
Yeah, it
makes
is.
sense. So if used in the right way, or
Mm.
if kids are taught how to use it properly, it's like, so put all your ideas into it, and then it might give you a skeletal framework of an essay, or a skeletal framework of a project or whatever. And the problem is with phones, with
Yeah.
AI, the genie's out the bottle.
Mm.
you ain't ever putting it back in the bottle.
No, we're
It's
not. Yeah,
not
of
going to
course not.
happen.
We're not going to say in 20 years' time, we're not all going to be back to just writing on chalkboards again. I mean, what I teach on is what's called Prometheus. It's a smart board.
Oh, I
It's
saw that.
intense.
Yeah,
Well, that was an old. I mean, we're
was
11
it?
years down the line now. The things we've got now are just incredible pieces of technology. The
There's
stuff we can do.
no board rubbers getting thrown at my head.
No,
thrown at my head
yeah.
anymore.
No, just use your finger. You have to lob your own finger at somebody.
Wow.
But it's incredible the technology that's there. But again, it's the whole backwards planning of it all is the reason it's not successfully merged, well, one of the many reasons, is they have to sit paper exams at the end of it. They have to
Right.
sit, and here's a 2 hour booklet that you've got to fill in 2 hours. You know, just like you do in every job you'll ever do. You'll be ushered into a room in utter silence to do your work for 2 hours, and at the end of 2 hours, you have to submit that. It's not replicated anywhere now. That kind of the way they're sort of trained to do exams, but the idea that somebody's got to come up with a system where you can be assessed on how productive you are and how well you present something and how well you produce a piece of work over a realistic time frame using all of the technological advantages that you would have in, when you leave this place.
Yeah.
And it's so bold and radical that I don't think I'll see it in my time in
No, I
schools.
mean, it's like you said, they were talking about reform, and when you went to Westminster and this, it wasn't really reform. It's a wolf in sheep's clothing. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just shuffling the dominoes about the board. It's not actually sort of starting a new game. And I think it will take something extremely radical to sort of, but I do think it's needed, and I think the likelihood is, I mean, I've seen it and this is the perfect example when you mentioned about China and comparing what they do in China. They're using AI to make sure that kids are concentrating in class, and if they get less than sort of 90% concentration, and now that's obviously, in my opinion, not the right way to use AI. But it's very oppressive.
But at least they're thinking about how to do it and making it match the system. And I'd love to be proved wrong about this, but I don't see any sort of national level somebody coming and say, oh, by the way, we've had a real good think about how we can use this, which is beneficial to kids, get them there to use it properly, and that'll set them up for their life after school. It's going to be more, how do we stop them using this?
Yeah.
And I think the tipping point might come because if I really actually think about this, if I go back to when I was 21 before I got my first phone, I was 30 before I got a smartphone, and now I'm 48 and you get a watch with all this stuff on. And I suppose in 10, 15 years time, somebody will have come up with a way where you can have this information, but it will be imperceptible almost.
Yeah, internal.
Well, maybe it's like, I'm just, this sounds like a bit of sci-fi now, but contact lens. So it's something that is
they've got the Neuralink at the minute. Yeah, the Neuralink. There's one recently. I saw it was really cool. So basically, a guy that was quadriplegic from the neck down, and they had a pair of robot arms.
Right.
And he was controlling the robot arms just with his brain, with the Neuralink.
It's incredible,
and now,
isn't it?
if they can do that now, 10 years time, it's going to be full bodies. Nobody's going to be paralyzed anymore, and away we go. And
but I think it could get to a point where, as you know, I'm in charge of exams where I am, but we are looking at the kids as they go in, empty your pockets, no watches on. This is what so you can't cheat. And every night they'll try and sneak in something off the paper, but there's going to come a point, I think, where we won't be able to tell that the kids have got something on them. They'll have a way of accessing information that we can't see on a visual inspection.
Yeah,
and if we get to that point, we have to change because every kid will get 100%.
They do now. I mean, I remember, it was all paper, and I think it was Nokia 3210, so you had like 80 characters for a text or whatever.
That's it.
But there was kids that cheated. I know kids that cheated on GCSEs
using them. Yeah.
And it's like, if they could do it then with a brick phone, they're going to be doing it now, and they're going to be doing it in future. Kids will always find a way, and it's only going to become more innovative. And I think that sort of ties into the point and I'd love your opinion on it in terms of, I think from your point of view, and please correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
I think in a way you believe that school prepares children now for life or for life outside, but in another aspect, I don't think it does. I don't like, you get the age old argument. Nobody ever taught me how to do a tax return. Nobody ever taught me
Yeah.
how to pay my bills or,
Yeah.
this, that, the other.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's,
I never
life
had
skills.
I never had a lesson in painting a wall in the kitchen. And I was, well, no, you didn't. You're all right. Maybe you should.
Yeah.
But again, I'm 48. I've never painted a wall in the kitchen.
No.
So it's not something I'm good at. But I mean, I think preparing kids like that, and again, more and more important is to prepare kids for life it's the social interaction.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's getting them to know how to respond and interact with other people. And that sort of levels of sort of mutual respect and communication are all sort of vastly more important at the end of the day than solving a quadratic equation.
Mm.
And that is a really sort of important thing. And actually, the two do go hand in hand. And I would not say, I mean, when you talk about good teachers and bad teachers, comparatively, if I had to rank myself as a teacher on the metric of what you think would make a good teacher, which is diligent planning, really sort of structured marking, giving individual feedback, and all of this really meticulously planned things that you do in the lesson and all this, I rank myself somewhere below the middle, because I've had this sort of conversation with a few people that I'm, for want of a better phrase, a personalities teacher. I mean, I know the curriculum inside out. I know maths. I've been teaching for 20 odd years. And somebody could say to me, there's a year 10 set 3 over there who need a lesson on fractions. And I'd be quite happy to walk in and teach an hour-long lesson on fractions with no prep and no notes. And I'd like to think that most of the class would be engaged, because I really put sort of front and center is having that respect for the kids. Having that, I don't, going in, bawling, shouting, screaming. And I'm really happy to say I've seen less and less of this in teaching, but going as sort of an oppositional standpoint to the kids and sort of saying, do this because I've said so. And the second somebody steps out of line, they're the issue. It's like, no,
Yeah.
it's like, but you've got to establish that mutual respect. In a nice, not like's probably the wrong word. The kids have got to respect you, but they've also got to see, and you said this about yourself, about your Big Mac, I think it was called.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's, he's fair, he's consistent. He might be firm. He
Mhm.
might, it might be, he'll tell you what you need to do. But if you set those boundaries, you say, this is how we operate in here, and you're firm and you're fair, then that's, basically all you can ask. Shouting or something, it's rare. I mean, I will raise my voice if I have to get above a bunch of kids. If there's something where, if there's something going on where I have to sort of shout to stop it from a distance, I would do that. That sort of idea of actual shouting rather than raising your voice to make a point, or that sort of to get a bit of control and then bring it back down again. That's a sort of different thing entirely. And, shouty teachers who just, do this, do it in silence because I said you should do it. It's never going to work. And the best teachers that I see, they have got that mix of the two. They're incredible planners. They have some. They seem to have more hours in the day than the rest of us. They do all this planning, and then they're just thoroughly decent people. And
I think
kids pick up
that
on that.
you've hit the nail on the head there, is in terms of all the best teachers that I remember were just decent folk. And they were, like now, obviously I'm considerably older. I wouldn't mind having like a couple of hours conversation with them, because I'd probably enjoy listening to them and speaking to them. Whereas I did have teachers, and again, it must have been languages because it was a French teacher
Yeah.
that I never got on with. We just didn't see eye to eye whatsoever. He was
Yeah.
very much authoritarian. And I in fact, I remember getting thrown out of his car. I'll tell you the story. So we got, as a treat, a Christmas treat, because it was
Yeah.
around Christmas, we were getting to write down Silent Night, the hymn in French.
Oh,
That
you
was our
lucky
treat.
swines. How lucky you are.
I know. So he mentioned, if you leave 3 lines from the top and start writing, it fits perfectly on the page. Now, as everybody that's listening to this knows, on a workbook, you have a big line at the top.
You do, yes. Your title line.
I thought it was quite a pertinent question. Does it include that big line, sir? The response I got was "Get out."
Yep.
Get out of the classroom. I know, because he thought I was being flippant, and it was a legitimate question.
Genuine question.
And anyway, I ended up getting thrown out, and my head of year, Mick Ennis, who I spoke about, he basically came up to me, asked me what had happened. I told him, and he went, "It looks like you've got a free period. I suggest you go to the library." And it was like he couldn't say he was out of order.
Yeah.
But he understood and was decent and said, "Look, blah 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 blah. I didn't get a double bollocking. I just got right, go and sort off your part." And that bought so much respect from me to him, because it was like, we're on the same team.
Yeah. And that's it, isn't it? It's like, you mentioned that you wouldn't be able to teach, and you'd end up in jail. But, and again, you talk to people, and again, I remember talking, one of the first ever Christmas do's I went to as a teacher, there was the head of year 7 was there, and she had a new fella, and he was a fireman. And he was talking to me, and he was just like, he was telling a story about how that day he'd crawled through a burning building to rescue somebody. And as he was crawling back, because he had a bandage on, and as he was crawling back out, burning raft had fallen and hit him on the back and burnt him. And he sort of shrugged off this flaming rafter to drag someone to safety. And you're listening to this guy, and you're thinking, God. And then 2 minutes later, he's in, I couldn't do what you do. It was like, what are you talking about? You literally crawled through a burning building. I'm teaching fractions to 25 variously disinterested 12-year-olds. And to me, it never compared. At the end of the day, I'm in a safe way. And again, a similar sort of story. Quite a decent friend of mine worked in the RAF, and he was a helicopter pilot. And I don't see him very often, and we were having a drink one Christmas, and he told me this story about he'd had to land a helicopter in a minefield, and it was pitch black, and they were rescuing somebody who'd been injured. They had to go and he had to say he was lowering the helicopter to lower down like this, and the rotors would set off mines, and they get to a point where they're a certain distance away, where the only option they have to do is basically shut off the engine and drop the helicopter into a minefield, and then go and get this shot guy to go into a minefield in the pitch black fire escape, put him on and fly off again. And then I think I told him about the fact I had 4 kids not do the homework. and I tripped over the top step and spilled a bit of coffee on my fingers. And the kid had seen me and laughed at me. And again, he was, I couldn't do what you do. I just couldn't do it. I was like, this feels like it should be the other way around. It feels like, it's a worthy profession. It's a vocation, but it doesn't feel to me like a brave profession.
I think it is. I think it kind of, the stories that you've said, it kind of shows a reverence for educators and for teachers. They are, for anybody listening, they are the cornerstone and the backbone of every single society, not just like English people or Scottish or Welsh, for every single society that there's ever been, from the dawn of man. Educators, storytellers are the foundation of that society's success. The only reason why the Egyptians were amazing and lasted for centuries and decades and whatever is because they had a written language, and they learned, and they could learn from the mistakes of the past because of the written language, and they had teachers and a belief system, and these, they probably did have schools. I'm pretty certain they will have done. And it's that sort of the reverence for these educators within our society. I think he's still there, and he's still held by a lot of people. But at the same time, I think the lack of evolution is the what's the word? The frustration is being cast towards people like yourself and teachers rather than at the system itself, which is where it should be cast at. It's very similar now with, I see it constantly, and I won't get in to this too much because I don't want to. I don't want to. I've had enough of it. But like you hear the sort of the thing with immigration at the minute and the billionaire, tax the billionaires and this, that, the other, where it's like all you're doing is fueling a symptom. You're not actually looking at the actual cause and issue of the problem. Like you're talking about tax the billionaires. Well, no, that's not the problem. The problem is where is the current tax going? Because they've collected £1 trillion this year. So where's that gone? Don't offer them more tax. Find out where the current stuff's going. And nobody seems to be sort of saying it. Same with the immigration. It's like, well, immigration isn't the problem. What's the problem? Is the problem that people feel like they don't have enough money to live. They don't have the cost of living is ridiculous. They can't function like they used to be able to do. So the problem isn't immigrants. The problem is the fact that companies are bleeding people dry left, right, and center, whether that be energy, food, water, and this is the issue with education is the fact, or the way I see it is, it's not teachers, it's not the children, it's the system that these people operate in isn't not fit for purpose in the 2025. It needs to be updated and it needs to be brought into the 21st century. And I think, it leads me onto a point because, we talked about the grades 9 to 1 and the A stars and this, that, the other.
Yeah.
The amount of emphasis that's put on that, tell me if I'm wrong, but from a mental health perspective, it'll put so much pressure on you as a teacher. Because I saw it. I saw it in the episode that the first clip that I watched.
Yes.
Is you were ill health, if you don't mind me saying.
No, absolutely
You went into ill health because you were so committed to helping these children. It was achieve these grades that they needed to pass out and obviously for the school and so on and so forth. And these, it will have an effect on you mentally. And that's the same as well. And if not more so, because they're obviously a little bit more susceptible, a little less hardy than us adults, for children. If they don't get the grades, you see it every year where, unfortunately, there is children that take their own life because they didn't get the results, these letters or numbers they are now. They didn't get these numbers that they wanted.
And it is sort of packaged as this sort of be all and end all. I mean, going back to that time when I was unwell, there's actually a couple of things going on there. Actually, I was just generally unwell as well, but it was that feeling that, well, I can't take time off at this point of the year. I can't be unwell 3 days before a GCSE exam. So I'm going to keep going to work as I get sicker and I thought I've got, at the end of the week when they finish their exams, then I can afford to be ill. And, it nearly cost me my leg, to be honest with you. Only because I had blood poisoning and sort of sepsis in my leg, and I was in hospital for weeks after that. And it was really sort of unpleasant. And part of it was, the ill health side of it was more to do with an infection I got in my leg. But the mindset of, I'm not getting this sorted out until this is finished, that's really bizarre if you think about it. A few years later, sort of not on television, I decided for my own reasons that I was going to learn to snowboard. I'm not built. I'm not built for snowboarding. But I thought, I know it'd be good. It'd be a good thing for me to do. And where I lived at the time, there was one of these indoor snow ski slope places, and I thought, right. And I paid for these lessons. At the end of 6 lessons, on my last day and the last lesson, my last run down I got so good enough to go down the big hill by myself, and I just got right to the bottom, and the binding on the back of my it broke, and my foot slipped out of the back of the snowboard, hit the snow, and flipped me like that. Completely just flipped up in the air, and I landed like that. And it just ricocheted up and it shattered the bone here. So I sort of went down like and my instructor, who'd seen me do this, who was some 23-year-old with a cool name I can't remember. I was sat on the floor like this, and he high-fived me on the hand. So it just went like that. It still sounds like a football battle to this day. But I drove home. Because the next morning I was teaching a 7 o'clock lesson for a GCSE exam that was starting at 9 o'clock. So I drove home with this, just like completely unable to use this, just propped it there and somehow drove home. And I got up the next morning and it was black. And it was
Oh,
like,
nice.
I'd slept with like, I put a towel underneath it, a bag of peas on top of it and gone to sleep. And I got up this and I thought, well, like, if I go to hospital now and I'm there all night, I'm not going to be in time to teach this lesson at 7 o'clock in the morning. So I drove to work with it and I got to it and I taught with my right hand. I couldn't write anything down. I was trying to write with my left hand and I like managed to get somebody to come in and write for me. And I got them into the exam and I went to the head and I just went, I'm going to go to hospital now. And they were like, what have you done? And I was just like, I had an accident last night. But I didn't want to miss this. And it's weird, but you do have that kind of internal thing of, all right, I can't not do this because, what if it's that extra 1 or 2 marks that gets them across the line? And it's just weird. I mean, I'm much better with that mindset now. I think going back sort of 10 years ago, I was very much, all the hours sent, I will be out, I will work, I will keep on working. And I have become a lot better at sort of compartmentalizing things and managing my time and it's the acceptance of you can only do so much and prioritize the important things. And the important things is, of course, 99% of the time is the kids. It's that's where the important thing is. Yeah, and so those pressures, but like you say, that pressure then passes on to kids. If you are constantly saying to kids, if you don't get these grades, you won't go to that college. If you don't get these college, go to that college, you're not going to get to that university. If you don't go to that university, you'll explode in a ball of flame and and it feels like that. And I think I remember a really sort of amazing woman I worked with early in my career. She said actually on her leave, she left to do a PhD in the cranial shape of prehistoric sheep or something. It was really bizarre. It was one of these weird PhDs that you can be a doctor of sheep cranium. And on her leaving, she said, none of us in the room, no matter how young or old we are, will ever really remember, because I think we black it out, how it is to be a teenager in the first place. All the stuff that's going on in your head as a teenager. But then for 5 hours a day, every day, you have to go from one classroom to another classroom to another class. And in every single one of them, you're going to be taught an hour of brand new information. And you're going to be expected to remember that hour of brand new information in 2 years' time and write it down on a piece of paper. Do you imagine having to do that as an adult? Spend 5 hours of your day.
I guarantee 99% of adults will tell you to fuck off. I'm not doing that. Not doing it.
Yeah, of course they would.
And I think it is that it's like I said at the beginning, in terms of I went through, probably 22 hours of a week where it's like, well, obviously a bit less because you've got lunch hours and stuff in that. But I went through, 19, 18 hours a week of like, not really interested.
Yeah.
I'll coast through this. And I was luckily I was intelligent enough to do. I was intelligent enough to coast through lessons to the point where it was like I passed every single one. I didn't do a minute's worth of revision at all. I passed every single one. But I excelled in the subjects that I was interested in.
Yeah.
And it was like I spent my weeks either waiting for weekend or waiting for that 1 hour lesson where it was like, oh yeah, we've got chemistry. Brilliant. Oh, this is what I did last time and this is what I can build on now. And then it was like, as soon as it come to the end of that lesson, it was like, right, well, I've got to wait another week for that now.
Now it's French. Now it's German.
Oh God, no. Yeah. But yeah, I think that's the thing for me is I hope you're wrong. I hope that in our lifetime they do have like a proper reform where it becomes, I was speaking to one of my previous episodes, Jake Swindles. He's I'm going to get this wrong. He's the director of Countryside Alliance or something up in Scotland.
Yeah.
I'm going to see him on the 4th, actually, 4th of December, but I've got that. I've butchered that. Sorry, Jake. Yeah. But but basically he mentioned on the episode about a bill that is trying to get through Scottish Parliament in terms of compulsory 1 to 2 hours per week of primary school children spend it out in nature.
Yes, I know about this.
and
Yes,
spend it
absolutely.
outside. And ultimately, what it's getting blocked at Parliament level.
Mm,
Um, whereas every single person that's behind Parliament that have sort of brought this to them is in favour of
yeah,
it. And I personally believe that is, I know some of the best life lessons that will stay with my daughter until she dies have been outside on mountainsides and in the wilderness, because that it teaches, like you said, life skills and experiences. And I think, we're seeing, and I don't know whether it is in secondary school, but especially on the primary school level, there's a massive surge of sort of forest schools
yeah,
and nature schools that are
absolutely.
happening.
Yeah.
And I think is, to your knowledge, is there any secondary, I haven't even looked secondary school wise yet, but
Yeah.
is there ones like that,
That do
to your
forest schools
knowledge?
stuff. No, we have so groups that come in. We do a thing at our school called Boost. And again, for a particular one of my colleagues, if he's listening to this, because he was, when I mentioned I was doing this to him today, he thought it was the fanciest thing in the world. And so if Nick's listening to this, he introduced a thing at our school last year called Boost, which is for 2 hours every second Wednesday. So once a fortnight on a Wednesday for 2 hours, the kids don't do normal lessons. They do experiential things.
Yeah,
So and again, we've had land artists come in and take all the kids outside and create artwork outside. We have sort of animal sanctuaries coming in and bringing in the animals for kids to look at. They've gone out and just done just things they wouldn't normally do.
yeah, yeah,
And there's been so much stuff, and I've given notice. And most people, when they heard about this, were just like, "Well, there should be an extra maths or English. Why are we doing this? Why was it?" And yeah, and I can sort of see some people saying, well, if the kids are getting bad results, why are they going rock climbing when they could be doing a bit of extra maths or English? But the fact of the matter is, if they're getting bad results with 9 hours a fortnight of maths,
yeah.
10 hours a
Well,
fortnight of maths isn't
you're gonna
necessarily
cut
going to
it.
turn them around. But
Yeah.
actually, if they're engaged in something else and it just sparks a bit more of a love of the school, that
Mm.
sort of they enjoy coming to school more. Wednesday afternoon, I can do this. It's different. So maybe Wednesday morning, I'll keep my head down and crack on. So I don't lose that potential sort of engaging thing. And it's just a different way of looking at it. And it's
Yeah,
quite a
it's the
bold
love
thing to
of,
do.
it's
But
almost like cultivating that love of learning. I never had that.
yeah,
Even in the lessons that I enjoyed, there wasn't really a love for learning there. And obviously you'll get it every single day where kids that you teach know everything. They can't be taught
yeah.
anything.
No,
I
no, no.
know.
Yeah.
You know, I know. You don't
Yeah.
need to tell me.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I get that now, and my daughter's only
Yeah.
10, so I've got at
I think you're
least
fine.
another 10 years of
Yeah. Yeah.
this. Um,
Mm.
but I think it's I reading really helped me when I could start choosing my own books and thinking, you know what, I'll delve into that. And one of the first books I in fact it was when I was traveling. So Erica, who episode came out last week, I met her in Botswana in
All right.
Africa. And whilst I was over there, obviously in all the backpackers, they had book swaps. And the first book that I picked up was a Stephen Fry book, and I can't remember for the life. I remember the premise. So basically, the premise was somebody had built a time machine, and they were going to go back
Well,
and
making history.
that's it, yeah.
Making
And
history.
the
Yeah.
assassin.
Yeah.
Basically, the premise is they
Yeah.
assassinate Hitler,
Yes.
but the whole point is somebody worse takes over
Yeah.
and actually wins the war for the Nazis
Yeah.
and comes back to the future, and it's like, oh
It's,
shit,
yeah. Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
So I remember reading that cover to cover because there was not much else to do during the day. And I was like, this is, really good book. It was like almost like watching a movie because I hadn't watched TV for months. And then the second book was Life of Pi before it
Oh, right.
became a
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember reading the synopsis of that book
Yeah.
and thinking, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
This is stupid. This is stupid.
Richard Parker, the tiger.
Yeah, but it's like, so on the back of it said, in a lifeboat, there's a monk, an orangutan, a zebra with a broken leg, a hyena,
Yeah.
a tiger, and an Indian boy. And I'm like, Yeah,
Is
it don't
it?
make sense. This is
Yeah.
stupid, but it
Not
was
gonna
the
end
only.
well.
Yeah, it was the only book in English. Everything else
Right.
was in German. So I was
Yeah.
like, right, German again. I'm not
Yeah,
going down that route.
yeah.
So I was like, right, okay, I read that, and I remember reading it cover to cover, and that was the book that taught me not to judge a book by its cover,
Yes.
because it was like,
It is a
what an
great book, yeah.
amazing story. And then
Yeah.
you look at the movie, and they did it such justice in the movie. And then from that point, I kind of got a love of. I didn't realize I was learning. I didn't realize I was educating myself, but I got the love back for sort of reading books and almost educating myself without knowing I was. And then I got into authors like Graham Hancock, which is obviously very much down the educational route.
Yes. Yeah.
And then it was Robin Sharma and Jay Shetty and all these
Mm.
amazing sort of spiritual authors. And I think being outside, I know my daughter's got it. She has such a hunger for learning. She
Mm.
want, and I've inadvertently cultivated that within her, is because when she was younger, when when kids get to the why phase
Yeah.
of, well, you need to switch off that plug because it's got electric. Yeah, but why?
Right. Yeah. Why? Why?
And most parents did, and I should have at the point, just because it does.
Yeah.
Whereas I thought, you know what? No,
Yeah.
I'm going to tell her. So I told him, because this has electricity that's carried through cables underneath ground, blah 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 blah, and gave her the full answer. Same with did it with rainbows, did it with pylons, did
Why
it
is the sky
with
blue? Why is it? Yeah.
clouds. Yeah, did it with clouds. I taught her about precipitation and condensation and so on and so forth. And it's got to the point now where it's like she will not accept a fob off. She will
No.
not accept, which is a pain in the arse
Yeah.
sometimes,
The
because you're
rod for
like,
your own back.
oh
Is,
my God. And it's like, will you do this? Will you just go and get that? Yeah, but why? Yeah, well, I want you to get that because I want this to do this and this to do this. And she'll go, all right, okay. But it's like taking that extra, but that
Yeah.
hunger for that knowledge is so invaluable.
Oh, yeah.
And I think being outdoors and doing things in a practical way really, it would have helped me at school big time, because I've figured out at college at the same time, in terms of comprehensive learners, audio learners, and kinesthetic learners.
Yeah.
I was very much a kinesthetic learner.
Yes.
I comprehension was awful.
Yeah.
I hated it. Same as audio. It's like, yeah, but I want to see it. I know you're telling me, but just show me.
Yeah.
Show me, and then I'll be fine.
Mhm.
And I think, do you find one? Do you work with that within your classroom, finding out what kind of learners and what
Yeah.
works with certain students and so on and so forth?
It is, yeah. I mean, the whole sort of like VAK in secondary school, so visual, audio, and kinesthetic learning, it kind of got debunked as theory a while ago. There's in sort of not many schools will do those sort of registers anymore. But I think it's been replaced by just being adaptive, just sort of figuring out what works for the kids in front of you. I mean, to give a not an obvious reference at all, like Ken Dodd. So Ken Dodd, if you ever now again, I sort of love it. So comedy. Ken Dodd's not necessarily my favourite comedian, but I once sort of heard him talk, and he said, when you're doing a stand-up gig, you are constantly looking around the room for what joke lands with what section of audience. So you can see who laughs at one type of thing, and then they laugh over there, and then you start sort of layering the jokes on top of each other until like everyone's laughing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's the same kind of theory. If you're in a classroom and you show them how to do something, you model something, and you go round, and these kids have got it, they're fine, they can move on, but these haven't. So you have to say, right, pull everyone back together. Right, if you got this, you do this, but if you haven't, this is what I'm going to do for you now. Then you show them how to do that. And with maths, obviously, it's very difficult to be sort of practical modeling for a lot of time. The practical model of a quadratic simultaneous equation, I don't know what that is. It's a process, and it is, these are the steps that you have to do. And, here's one that's, the most basic that you'll see, then we make it difficult. These are and it sort of builds, and it is a lot of remembering processes is maths, and it's that modeling of it. And if it doesn't work, again, it's not because the kid's not listening to you, it's because the kid hasn't understood you. And that's a really important distinction. Not listening and not understanding are two very different things. And, if a kid is looking out of the window, then turns and says, I didn't understand this, then fine, you can be a bit narked at that kid for just not trying to engage. But if they've listened to you and they've written everything that you've done down and they've taken everything that you said, they've heard your questions and they still don't get it, saying to them, well, I've already told you this, it's awful. And I think it comes back to a point where we talked about a bit, consistency and fairness and being successful and being a sort of a good teacher. Quite often, it's a lot of it is about the way you treat students and because the students don't like maths, but a lot of students don't mind maths if they like their maths teacher. And you said, I 100% agree with maths being probably one of the most boring subjects.
I
And
enjoyed it.
boring's- yeah,
I enjoyed it. But certain elements. So I remember the course. I will never forget. How long ago is it now? It's 20 years ago. 21 years ago. I did
coursework,
the coursework. I mean, I don't know whether they still got coursework anymore, but
no, not.
it used to be account for like 30 to 40% of your overall
Yeah,
grade.
it dropped down to about 20% and then they got rid of it. But
yeah. And I did a full coursework on number squares.
Yes.
I remember my we did it in like partnerships. It was Tom Wood. I'll never forget.
Yeah.
And we did this course, and I was so engrossed in this number square, and in figuring and what it was. It was basically you populated a number square, and then you created a formula that would show what
total.
would populate that number square basically.
Yes.
So you could pick any square on that number board, and you'd work back the number, and that formula would get you that number again and again and again and again and again. I loved it to the point where I like now 20 odd years later I still remember it. And I think that's the thing though. It for a lot of people, the rest of maths, I mean, sin, cos, tan, go away. Hate it. But like you said, people have got calculators and computers in the pocket now. Just like, right, well, what's the hypotenuse of this triangle if this side is this and this is this, and it'll just tell you.
Yeah.
And I think understanding from a teacher's perspective, from your perspective, is like, yeah, some kids are going to get this and really enjoy it. Some aren't, and being okay with that.
Yeah.
Is being okay with it is the battle. That's because I remember, when I didn't get certain teachers would get annoyed, and it'd be like, yeah, but I just don't. I don't like it. One, I don't like it. Two, I don't get it.
Yeah.
And it's understanding and acceptance of that.
I think more of the battle as well is actually getting the kids to accept it doesn't matter that much if they don't get something. Because mathematics in particular is such a granular subject. As in, I mean, I teach year 10s and 11s at the moment, and I've been teaching both of them sort of advanced algebra for the last few weeks. And some of it, it's so abstract, and it's so, if you're not in that sort of mindset, you're not really a sort of a mathsy person, you're just looking at some of these stuff, you're like, why are we just moving these letters around? To what end? I've taken that letter and I put it over there, and I've changed the sign in front of it. Then I've taken that one, then I've substituted that one for something else. And and apparently it was 6. And now we're going to go to another one where it'd be 4.5. And why do we keep doing this? And I absolutely get that kids have that kind of moment of, well, why are we doing this? But some of the stuff's really high end. And if they don't get it, they don't get it. They'll come back and try again, and we build that into their revision, and we try and get them to get it. But to get like the top grades on a maths paper, you still, the grade, what was a grade A, the level 7, you're looking at 60%, just over 60%. So you can get 40% of it wrong and still get a grade A in our old money terms.
Wow.
And it's like, and to get like the grade 4s and 5s, you can get it. If grade 4 on a higher tier maths paper now, you can get like 20 to 25%. So imagine, and that's a grade C. So imagine going in to an exam paper and not understanding 3/4 of it and coming out with a nice
With
pass.
a pass, yeah.
It's,
Wow.
it's a weird thing to say to
Yeah.
me, you're going to do an hour and a half of an exam. You're not going to understand 3/4 of it. That's fine.
Yeah.
That's where I want you to be at.
That's yeah.
I want you to have
just
10,
learn this
yeah.
quarter.
Well, I want you to have 12 really good minutes at the beginning of the exam. And I want you to have 78 minutes of abject terror and desolation. And in August, you'll be fine. And you'll move on. And it's so odd.
It's
isn't it?
but
Yeah.
I mean, I do understand is the fact that you know, with the amount of children and like you said, the amount of teachers, the ratio between the two, you've got to have some kind of standardized system in place. There's just
absolutely.
There's no getting away from it. And anybody that says otherwise is naive. It just, you know, it can't happen. But at the same time, it is like you said, the standardized system is archaic because it's just the same system dressed up differently again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
I think what like I've recently gone through a spate of watching teacher movies.
Right.
There's one that I watched recently. In fact, I'm going to I don't want to get it wrong because it is a really good movie. It's got Adrian Brody in it. I will tell you in a second. But I watched the one with Matthew Perry. I can't remember Mr.
Yes,
I can't remember that one.
I keep seeing them.
That's a really good one.
Yeah.
Detachment, it's called.
Yes, the Adrian Brody one. Yeah.
The Adrian Brody one.
Yeah,
it's really fantastic. And I've gone through sort of a spate of these sort of teacher movies. And I don't know why they speak to me and I enjoy it. Like Coach Carter is one of the most famous ones. You know, phenomenal movie. And I think, not necessarily them movies that I've mentioned, but do you think kids? I would learn through movies. I still do learn through movies. I enjoy it, and to sort of teach maybe a concept. Do you think there's certain movie? If you could advise a kid now that's maybe year 10, year 11, that's dreading the GCSEs, what sort of movies would you recommend them to sort of watch?
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yes, love it.
Just stop and look around. Life moves pretty fast.
Don't steal a Ferrari though.
Yeah, no, well, no,
definitely don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that bit. Again, it is that thing. I think sort of that idea of learning through movies, and I think actually, sort of for a year 10, year 11 kid with the stress and pressure of GCSEs, I would say look at something life affirming. You know, I would say try and sort of go for a more feel good or escapist kind of film if you were going to look at. I mean, the classic, I suppose, is Good Will Hunting as a mathematician.
Oh, well, as soon anybody mentions algebra, that is the first thing that pops into my head.
Yeah.
It's like the applied mathematics, you don't really learn anything, but it's understanding that the weight of genius or the weight of, you know,
and
it can come from anywhere.
Yeah, they learn in different ways, and you know, you don't just because you don't learn in the same way somebody else doesn't make you any less or more smart than they are.
Yeah,
it's such a spectrum, and his intelligence being such a spectrum. I mean, I remember, I think I was 20 when Good Will Hunting came out. I say I think, I know I was 20. And I was at the third year of university, and I remember watching it with my partner at the time, and sat there watching it. And there's a bit where they leave the problem on the board, and he's solving it. And I remember I can't stop myself. I remember just sort of saying to her, "Well, that's wrong." And she, for God's sake, it's a film. That's what it was. Why did it? And it was, but yeah, it's those stories of the message about how education can be sort of transformative is another. I mean, they're sort of very twee in some ways, but I mean, Dead Poet Society is sort of a classic teacher film that people go to, and that. But yeah, I think the better ones are the ones, like you say, Detachment with Adrian Brody is very good, and Coach Carter is always a sort of fallback, and things like Remember the Titans. With
Remember the Titans. Yeah, it was, what I mean, I think what I enjoy throughout every single one of them movies is that Patch Adams is another with
Yeah,
Robin
Williams.
Williams. It's like there's not one road or one route to
No.
whatever life that you want. So
Yeah.
I know I'll always remember my results day. So results day for GCSEs. I remember going down, and without sounding pig-headed,
Yeah.
I knew I'd passed. I was all right. I just didn't know how well I'd done. I knew I'd got C's at least, which is
Mm.
was the
Yeah, that was it. That
benchmark.
was the benchmark. Yeah.
And I opened the thing, and I got one A star, one A, one B, and the rest were C's. And the A star, A, and B were in my favourite subjects,
Gosh,
and the
yeah.
rest were C's. And I remember it was Mick Ennis, the teacher that I spoke to you about before, who handed me my envelope.
Mm.
And I remember him saying, bearing in mind, you got to remember he knew my dad. He said, "What's your plans?" And I said, "I'm going to sixth form. Our school had a sixth form to do A levels." And he went, "Don't do that."
Right.
I remember at the time thinking, "You cheeky bastard!
Just want to
Like,
open this now.
I've just passed all my GCSEs.
Yeah.
Like, give me some credit."
Yeah.
And after my AS levels, my first year, it all made sense. It all made sense why he said it is because I failed every single one of them. Academia wasn't my forte at all, and and that sort of tough love that you get from in films like Coach Carter, in films like Detachment. What's the one with Matthew Perry called? Can't remember that.
He's the sort of, the kindergarten. It's not kindergarten, but he's younger kids, isn't he? He's teaching.
Yeah,
It's his name, Mr. Something it's called.
yeah, but it's because it's a true story
Mm.
as well, which is why it struck me. Matthew Perry teacher movie. I can never remember.
Yeah.
The Ron Clark story. That's the one.
Ron Clark, that's it. I knew it was his name.
Yeah, and it's that sort of alternative way to teaching. It's that sort of tough love of like, I'm in it if you are. We're in this together. We, that the whole sort of it's the age old sort of musketeers, all for one, one for all.
Yeah.
And I think that makes such a big difference to kids wanting to learn.
Yes.
Than sort of resisting that authority. For you did it yourself in terms of like, I'm not doing that, when you were picking your career, and it's that sort of, if they're with you, they're going to come with you. If they're not, they're against you. And it is very much that black and white with kids.
Yeah.
So I wanted to touch on the book that you mentioned as well before, because I'd never heard of this. Right. And quite poignant, we mentioned digital ID and everything and I did a little bit of a vanity project earlier last month. I kind of rewrote like a chapter of 1984 as if it was modern day, and I narrated it and I put it on, and it was just a little bit of a vanity project for myself. And I only read 1984 last year. That was it took me that long to. It's just. Oh, it's George Orwell. Everybody talks about it. I can't be bothered, blah, blah, blah. And I read it and I was like hooked. I think I read it in 2 days. That's how hooked I was, up until like 3, 4 a.m. in the morning. Whilst the missus is elbowing me.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned this book, The Brief and Frightening Reign of Phil.
Yes.
By George Saunders. I've never heard of it. Ever in the slightest. Do you want to explain the sort of story and the synopsis behind it? Because I found it really gripping, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, I read it on holiday I was in Lanzarote, I think, to remember. It just sort of nearly 20 years ago, and I think it was roughly the year it came out. And the story. It's an absurdist story. It's very, very short. It's about 90 pages, the entire thing. And actually, you get the book, and it's massive. But the last 250 pages are just sort of little typical essays the same author has written, which they're a different thing entirely. But the story is there's a country called Inner Horner, and it's so small that only 6 people live there, but only one of them can fit in it at any time. So there's one person stood in the middle of the country, and the other 5 stand around that person in what's called the sort of safe designated zone. And the people of Outer Horner, which is this from the descriptions, this almost limitless country that surrounds Innerhorner have allowed them to have. So they allow them to stand all together in this close little circle for free, bear in mind. They don't charge them to do this. And then every sort of day or so, it rotates and the person inside comes outside and the person outside goes inside. But they're not, they can't move from this area. And all these people of Outhorn who have just got incredible lifestyles and all this wealth and just all this, still look on these people with resentment because they're using that little bit of their country. And then at one point, one of them sort of strays beyond this sort of boundary. And everybody on this they're incensed that this inner Hornerite has encroached a bit further in. And they start like, well, we just need to tax them for doing this. They're in our country. Let's tax them. And this guy called Phil, who it turns out he fell in love with one of the 6 inner Hornerites, but she didn't reciprocate it. And he had to watch her get married to another. And he's become bitter and twisted about this. He starts kind of like, let's tax them, let's do this. And he sort of gets to be in charge and they're oppressing these little 6 people are getting really badly oppressed just simply because of where they were born and happen to live, if you like. So the satire is not particularly subtle. And it was written when George W. Bush was president. And it was this kind of the foreign policy was very much like jingoistic and patriotic to America. And if you're not American, then somehow that's your fault and you should be punished for it. And it just really spoke to me at the time. But then revisiting it under a sort of a Trumpian lens, it's even more pertinent, this idea that they're different from us. And the fact that they're different from us is really hammered home because, as I say, there's an absurdist quality to it. Like, they're not human. This comes one of them's got like a mechanical digger for an arm, and he gets nervous and he keeps pouring it to the ground his mechanical digger arm, but it's this kind of thing of that. It's populist sort of politics, if you like. It's, the Trumpians just say all the time, here's someone to blame. Here's someone who we can say it's their fault. And then let's persecute and punish them instead of, and you mentioned it yourself, instead of looking what the actual problem is.
That's half the battle is that blame game and kicking the can and passing the buck or whatever analogy you want to use.
Yeah.
Is the fact that I looked into it the other day and I'll probably do a release a post on it later on. And it was just, I think I want to release the post on it because I don't think a lot of people understand or know, is the fact that, like, now in this country, in the UK, so, regardless of who the Prime Minister is, regardless of whichever government's in power, whether it be Conservatives or Labour or Reform or Greens or whatever, the way that the country has been run over the past however long has led to the point where our national debt, the interest on our national debt that we have to pay back per year exceeds our defence budget. It exceeds our education budget. Like, but and not by a little bit. Like, so it exceeds our education budget by £60 billion. Like, this is not it. If this was a company, if this was a company where now your debt exceeds 100% of what you can make in a year as a country, then maybe you're shit at running a country. And maybe you should stop and find a new line of work.
Maybe everybody's been terrible at this for the last God knows how many years.
Yeah. And it's that sort of thing where it's always a scapegoat. It's always a blame game. You've got Labour blaming Reform. You've got Reform blaming Labour. Then if it wasn't Reform, then it was Conservatives. Now it's Reform. And you've got Greens part blaming billionaires, and you've got Reform blaming immigrants. And it's like nobody actually looks at the facts of, right, well, yeah, but these are all symptoms of a problem. Like, for instance, let's take the analogy of the book that you mentioned. I can't wait to read it, to be honest. I've ordered it. But it's the fact that, right, well, what's the cause of the symptom? The symptom was someone strayed. Well, maybe the cause is the fact that the land that they've got is not big enough to accommodate 6 people. So let's solve the issue rather than let's keep on fucking about with symptoms constantly. It's the perfect analogy of it was when they banned the XL bully breeds under Rishi
Yes.
Sunak.
Mm.
Is the fact that, don't get me wrong, I understand these are big dogs. I've got a bulldog myself.
Yeah.
The big dogs, they can be dangerous. However, there's Rottweilers, there's Alsatians, there's Great Danes, there's bulldogs. They're all big dogs. They're all capable of biting and killing a child.
Mm.
It's not the dog, it's the owner.
Yeah.
So where's you're tackling a symptom again and not the actual cause of the problem.
Yeah.
And it's the same. Obviously it does bleed into stuff like education for yourself, is the fact that stop tackling symptoms and tackle the cause of the problem. And
Yeah.
actually look at the causality of it rather. I mean, what if you magic one waved
Yeah.
and you are now in charge of all education across the UK?
Yeah.
What's the first thing you do?
Yeah.
Not a small question,
I
that,
say,
Michael.
what is the first thing you do? Oh, years and years of pointless obfuscation and just research. No, I think the first thing you do, you've got to, from the bottom up, I think it goes back to the thing. It's absolutely a disgrace that you can have 5-year-olds where you have a 2 to 3 year gap in reading abilities. And I think you've got to address reading straight away. The first thing, kids be able to read and write to the best of their ability, which will always differ, but that's just got to be the first thing. When you get a 13-year-old who reads at a 5-year-old's level, that is systemic failure. That is something that has just gone wrong all the way through. And I would just look at, the absolute prioritization of reading, and not just sort of reading, being able to sound out words, but reading for understanding, reading for comprehension. And because without it, you can't do anything else.
No, it's true.
Your reading age of it, anything that you do, you've got to be able to read. I think if we can get reading sorted out, I think then I would love to see a system where personalization and bespoke curricula could be put in place at an almost child by child level. And it sounds like, I mean, how we get to that point is a completely different thing. But I would like, kids, because if you go back to thinking about the old grammar schools and secondary modern, where if you did well at school, if you passed your 11 plus, you went and did the academic subjects. And if you didn't, here's a hammer. And, but to be able to have that kind of pathways of learning, to say, if you are a kid who knows or has a thing in mind, said that I really am interested in chemistry, should there not be a way that you could say, right, here is chemistry, but here it is, let's take it to another level. Let's actually expand your knowledge in the thing that you are most interested in. And that can be to the detriment of art.
Something that you're not into. It makes so much sense. Like,
not to slag off art.
but I fell foul of that. So when I went into sixth form and was doing I wanted to do chemistry because that was the one of my passions. And this is the thing, when you were talking about English language and literature, and you're half your grade if you don't do literature and this, that, the other. I did applied sciences, so you get a double grade.
Yeah.
So in biology, I got a B. In chemistry, I got an A star. Physics, I got a U, which brought my overall grade to a C.
Yes.
Now, at A level, I couldn't pick to do chemistry because I didn't get a B or above. And I'm like, but I did in chemistry. I got an A star. And I wasn't allowed to do it at A level. Now, it might have been a different story. I might have gone on to be a chemist. Who knows? But I know I've fallen afoul of that system where it's like, and maybe a percentage system is a good way to, or a good route to go down, is the fact that what do you excel at? What really interests you? Right. Well, 50% of your weekly curriculum is going to be this subject.
Yeah.
The rest of it is going to be whatever else.
I remember reading once there was a school in New Zealand, and it was fascinating. It was the bottom floor of a shopping centre had become a school. Wow. And the kids, so the kids came in and basically the teachers were hired, obviously, but they had to they taught maybe the same lesson 4 or 5 times, but they did it on a kind of like, well, I'm going to teach you at 7 o'clock, at 9 o'clock, at 11 o'clock, at 1 o'clock, and 3 o'clock, for example. Kids opted in to the lessons
All
they
right.
wanted to do. So that teacher would maybe teach 5 hours over a 10-hour period, but the kids opted into what they actually wanted to learn. And
Right.
it was very much an experiment. And then so kids could come in, and as long as they met a certain number of credits, if they thought, well, I'm going to do Algebra 1 today with Mr. Steer, and then they liked that, so, well, I'm going to do Algebra 2 tomorrow, or I want to go all the way to Algebra 12. But that they did, they did ionic bonding 1, and that's not for me. Then they could drop out of that and replace that with more algebra. And
Right.
obviously there were parameters put into place. It wasn't like one kid who just was the most amazing algebraist in the world, but couldn't spell his own name. But it was just an interesting idea to me, that sort of that where students could, if as long as they hit a certain number of academic credits, they could sort of fill their buckets in any way they wanted to, or the ones that
Mm.
interested them. And I mentioned sort of getting rid of art, and I think it sort of ties a lot of stuff we talked about today. When I was in year 8, or second year as I called it when I was there, I had sort of an interaction with the teacher which had the potential to be really upsetting and damning. But it actually became an incredibly positive thing because of the way he thought about it and what he actually sort of said and how he went about it. So I was in art, and one of the things they decided we had to do was we had to, here's some magazines, find an image or find some images, make a collage out of them, and then you had to draw the collage, you replicate the collage. There was just kids who were doing these beautiful pictures and everything. And I, for whatever reason, I found a picture of an old big wardrobe with a stuffed swan on the top of it. And I had that in my, and I thought, oh, I'm going to draw this. And I was 8 lessons in, and I spent 7.5 of those lessons trying to get that swan's neck right. And I was just, and I was rubbing it out and he came over to this teacher, and he must have just seen me at about 7.5 hours on a swan's neck. And he said, come outside, come outside. And he just said to me, he went, I've been watching you. Art isn't for you. So I've had a chat with Mr. Chewins, who was the drama teacher. Paul Chewins, again, he was my teacher to A-level drama, great teacher. And he just sort of said, I've had a chat with Mr. Chewins. He said, you can do drama twice a week. He says, you love drama. You're really good at drama. So off you go. He's expecting you. And I went to the theatre where we had drama lessons, and Paul Chewins was there, and he just sort of beckoned me in, and I stayed there. And instead of doing art from the middle of the year onwards, I did 2 hours of drama a week. But then I did drama GCSE and I did drama A-level.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then not doing art didn't damage me. I had no ill feeling to Mr. McAndrew, who just said, you're not doing this anymore,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
he'd seen a solution to an issue. It wasn't my best thing. My time was better served somewhere else. And he fixed it for me in a very sort of kind and compassionate way. He didn't sort of say to me, you're terrible at this. He just kind
No,
of,
it's the way it should. Yeah, he's fixed it in an educator's way. You know, the thing is, and it's understanding that he inadvertently or probably knowingly saved himself from 3 years of hell trying to get you
draw
trying
the
to get the
swan's neck.
grade up to
Yeah.
you to pass art, because obviously he's judged on results.
Yeah.
And he
But I think
saved himself that headache, you that stress and headache, and cultivated your excellence at drama rather than your your mediocrity at art.
that's generous. It was abysmal, and I still am to this day. But it was just that thing of, it was bespoke. It was, to me, that was what needed to be done. And that on a national level would be fascinating, fantastic.
Mm.
And going back to what you said, if I was going to be really, really bold, I said, well, the first thing I'd do as as in charge of education, and this sounds very radical as a maths teacher, I wouldn't have a compulsory GCSE in math. I would have, I would say, be numerate,
Yeah, yeah.
financially savvy, but that doesn't need the algebra. That doesn't
No.
need an in-depth knowledge of the exterior angles of a hexagon. It's just not necessary for that. But if you're interested in maths, it's there as an option. But coding
But
is much more
yeah.
relevant to the maths now. Estonia, I think, forgive me if I've got that, I'm pretty sure Estonia were the first country in the world who said, well, maths is no longer a mandatory subject. but coding is. Because why are we teaching kids to do things on paper that this can do on it already? So let's teach them how to make this better. And I was like, wow, that's such a refreshing sort of way to look at
That
education.
advancement,
Yeah.
and yeah, and it comes back to that sort of thing with
Mm.
phones and technology and
Yeah.
AI and so on, is and I think this is where you know, I had the lesson with my daughter. So she was 9. Yeah, she got to 9 years old, and myself and her mum aren't together. So she has a phone here and she has a phone at her mum's. And she started. She doesn't actually have any SIM card in the phone at mine. She just uses it for apps and things because I'm very conscious about
Yes.
what the internet is.
Hmm.
It's a cesspool for all the bad things, as
Yeah.
well as obviously all the good things. But she started posting on YouTube, like, and TikTok, and doing these dances like kids do,
Hmm.
and you see them all over. And I got worried. I got worried about the fact that when I can't police this because I'm not with her 100% of the time. Or what do I do? And I went through like 2-3 weeks of sort of turmoil on how to do it. And I thought, you know what? I think the best thing to do, like it is with everything, is education. So what we'll do is we're going to start a YouTube channel, and I'm going to teach her how to use it properly, how to use it positively, and I can then manage it. And she started her own YouTube channel. It's called Little Person's Big Adventures, where we go out on the mountains, and she, gives out fun facts with Esme and this, that, the other. And it's really, it was a really good way of incorporating technology. Instead of saying no, it's banned and you can't use it, understanding for a full well that she is going to use it at some stage. It's like,
Yeah.
right, well, I'm going to teach her how to use it
Yeah.
properly.
Absolutely.
Uh, and I think it goes back you know understanding, like you said, with coding, is there will be children in your school now that will be utter whiz kids at
Absolutely.
it, and
Yeah.
they'll be, one of my friends, shout out to Neil. He's you would you wouldn't think to look at Neil, but anything with a computer, coding wise, he wrote. I think I'm right in saying he wrote the till systems for petrol stations, Tesco petrol stations.
Right.
He coded that till system.
Yeah.
Like, that is
Insane. Isn't it? Really? Yeah.
unbelievable. Yeah, I wouldn't
Yeah.
even know the first place to start.
No.
Um, I know. In fact, I know HTTP5 or
Right.
something.
Okay.
HTML5. That's the one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got that right. But other than that, like, it's completely foreign to me. But he just understands it, and the way that they write. Now, like you said, there'll be kids in your school that will just click and they will just understand it and just get it.
Absolutely.
But if it's not on the national curriculum,
Hmm.
what
I
what
mean,
what
yeah.
what can you do?
Yeah. Yeah. So because it's there, computer science is there, but it's an option, and you
Mm,
have to have gone through your bit of Key Stage 3 ICT to get to that, and it's an option, and it doesn't work for everybody, but it's not pushed in anywhere near the same way that maths and English and science are. And the thing is, the terrifying step of saying, if somebody in government turned around this one and said, you know what, maths isn't needed at that level for students, so let's make maths an option. Now, contrary to popular belief, if you said to 14-year-olds, maths is an option, still be probably the second biggest option subject in the country.
yeah,
You'd get maybe 40 to 50% of kids who would still say, well, I'm going to carry on doing maths because they've known it for so long. But if you said for those last 2 years, only 50% of the kids are going to do maths, think about the number of maths teachers that suddenly are out of work. Plus, we've got, 4,300 secondary schools in the country, or whatever it is. And every single one of them, we've got maybe an average of 7 or 8 maths teachers. If all of a sudden you take out
50%. Yeah,
in just a 2-year group, so you're talking like 20% of the whole school is no longer doing maths. So that's 1.5 to 2 teachers per school. That's 8,500 maths teachers that are suddenly not needed. So how do you sell that? How do you possibly sell that unless you do it in a 15-year plan
yeah,
and you
and
build it all the way up and
it's
say
that
kids, yeah,
self perpetuating
yeah,
system again. Well, like it is with a lot of things. Is
but
yeah,
yeah. But if you say kids born today kids born today will have GCSE maths as an option in 14 years' time rather than a compulsory subject. Then, as teachers retire and leave the profession, schools can start filtering that down, and they could do that plan. But what will happen is in 3 years' time, the next government will start and it'll be overturned anyway.
Yeah.
And we say, well, what a ridiculous idea that was. We're going to bring maths back for everybody.
It's well, this is the thing with sort of the kicking the can down the road politics. As the thing with the farmers and the food and the way that sort of it. I don't necessarily think it's an attack on farmers. I don't think it's an intent. There's no intent to attack farmers. However, I do very much think that in 30, 40 years' time, this will be a decision that's looked back on and thought, maybe shouldn't have done that at this. We maybe shouldn't have done that. And it always makes me think of the I think it's a Chinese proverb, is great leaders plant seeds of trees under the which they will never under the shade of which they will never sit. And it's like, if we had that sort of mantra when we would start making laws, like you said, in terms of the fact that if kids born now, by the time that they get to secondary school, you might have retired. Like it's not for your benefit. It's for, a greater good, so to speak. And I think if we had more of that within the world for the greater good, rather than for selfish point scoring nonsense. I think we could probably solve a lot.
That's what it is.
Solve a lot of problems.
And I suppose and it is that thing of sort of someone looking at education and looking at the whole thing and saying this entirely needs a tear down, and it needs rebuilding from the bottom up. And we have to plan how that's going to look and what's going to happen to the people who work in education at the moment. And it's a huge mind-bending job. And it's a commitment of 15 to 18 years in the first instance. And the sort of, that would need somebody in a position of power brave enough to say, we are going to remove education from the political sphere. And we are, the funding still comes from us, but the decisions are made by educators, not by somebody who used to run a pottery factory or a politics student. But these are genuine education secretaries, a politics student. And you're like, why is that going to happen? And it's the Trump, we mentioned Trump a couple of times, but his nomination for the Surgeon General in America is somebody who's never held a medical license. And people are saying, well, that sounds absolutely ridiculous. He's like, yeah, but we have defense secretaries who've never served in the military. We have a Secretary of State of Education who's never taught. I don't, how is it that they've not got somebody who has expertise doing these jobs? And
and it goes back to what we said in terms of, if NHS is a big buzzword. Public services, police, fire service, army, Ministry of Defence, whatever. Education is the foundation of every single aspect within our society. Everything. So if, anything that you can think of, any profession that you can think of, education, whether that be primary school, secondary school, further education, whatever it may be, that is the foundation of that industry. That is the foundation of that. That it should be number one priority for every single country on the planet. Is education needs to be above everything, because everything stems from that education. If you've got, the best trained doctors, because they've had you've had an education where they've been able to pick biology, physics, chemistry, and do 50% of their learning from the ages of sort of 11 to 16 purely on them three subjects, then the likelihood is you're going to have the best doctors in the world, because they've had a head start on every other child in the world. And it just defies belief. Well, it's like you said, it's almost like the blind leading the public. I was going to say blind leading the blind, but we see it. So
it's the blind leading the sighted, which is an odd, it's a really odd way around. But,
it does need it, and I hope it happens. And I hope anybody that listens to this, that's in or around that higher echelon of education reform or policy or whatever it may be brave, get off your ass, do something that matters, and do something that will actually provide or pay dividend down the line. Maybe not for you, maybe not for us that are talking about it now, but it will do in maybe 40, 50 years time, where we are number one in the world for education, which ultimately will in turn make us number one in the world for healthcare, number one in the world for everything else stems from it. And we would then hopefully have the best government as well in the world. But hey ho.
Pipe dreams.
Well, Michael, it's been absolutely awesome speaking to you. Thank you very, very much. I massively appreciate you. Keep up the amazing work.
It's been great.
I can only hope that when my daughter goes to secondary school that she gets a teacher that is as committed and is invested as you are.
Oh, thanks. It's nice to say.
And I think every single person that chooses the profession that you're in, well, David Beckham's just got his night out, honey. Sack David Beckham off. Get all the teachers up there. They can be proper sirs and dames then, rather than just kids calling them it. But thank you very much, and thank you everybody for listening.
Okay, take care, mate.
See you later. Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye bye.